A result has come in terms of the Jozef Puska trial. Frank Rainey is on the line now. Good afternoon, Frank.
Good afternoon, Sean.
Yeah, so he was found guilty.
He was. Just in the past few minutes, I've just stepped out of Court 13 at the Criminal Courts of Justice, where, as you can imagine, there was an incredibly charged, nervous energy around the building when word filtered out that a verdict was imminent. That happened just after the jurors had taken their lunch break. They'd only been deliberating for about 2.5 hours. It has been such an emotional and difficult few weeks for all involved, particularly Ashling's parents, Ray and Kathleen, her sister Amy, brother Cathal, and her loving boyfriend Ryan, all of whom had a front row seat to this horror show that has gone on, not just for the past few weeks. Their nightmare obviously began on a cold January afternoon last year. And I hope that today's verdict will give them some comfort because, as you say, after deliberating for just a couple of hours, the jury has found Jozef Puska guilty of the murder of Ashling Murphy.
And were the family in court to hear that?
They were. The courtroom, as it has been throughout the past few weeks, was bursting at the seams when the jurors returned to announce their decision. It was standing room only in Court 13. An overflow court was also opened up to deal with the crowds who came down today. But despite those crowds, you could still hear every footstep as the jurors shuffled back into their seats. I can only imagine what was going through the minds of Ashling's family. As I say, they've been here day in, day out, sitting through it all. Even the dreadful post-mortem evidence, which can't have been easy for them to hear how Ashling was stabbed 11 times in the neck and how the injuries to her fingers suggested that she had fought her attacker. The deliberations resumed just before lunchtime, and then very soon afterwards, as I say, they came back with that verdict, which was unanimous. The family filed back in then. Ashling's sister Amy and Ashling's boyfriend Ryan were first into the courtroom, and I just noticed Amy looking skyward as she waited for the jury to come back in. A few minutes later then, her parents Ray and Kathleen returned to the court, and I noticed Kathleen holding a really lovely framed photograph of Ashling. We've all seen the photographs of Ashling Murphy doing the rounds over the last 21 months or so since she was brutally killed in Tullamore. This was a photograph that I hadn't seen myself until today, and she held it aloft for everybody to see after the jury announced their decision. Puska had been brought back into the courtroom by 4 prison officers, and I just noticed as soon as his fate was sealed, and it did take a moment for him to realise, because there was an interpreter sitting in the dock alongside him, as has been the case throughout the trial. And it was only when that interpreter translated the jury's decision for him that he knew he had been found guilty and is obviously now facing a life sentence. He bowed his head. He looked very upset, very distressed. He scanned towards the back of the courtroom where his family were sitting, obviously learning this news themselves this afternoon.
And did the judge have anything to say?
Absolutely. Throughout this trial, obviously, as a trial judge, there wasn't an awful lot that he could have said in relation to the evidence, even the 4 or 5 hours that he spent summing up the evidence. But it was very clear how Mr. Justice Tony Hunt felt about the evidence when the jurors came back. He 100% agreed with their decision, and he had no hesitation in saying that. He said that he was satisfied that it is the correct verdict. And interestingly, he said, and this was a nod to, I suppose, how short their deliberations were, he said that he was glad that they didn't waste any more time with what he described as Puska's nonsense, because that's what it was. Nonsense. And he said that was no reflection on Mr. Puska's defence. Everyone is entitled to put forward a defence. He wasn't making a criticism of Michael Bowman and his team who defended him throughout. But he said to the jurors again when he was satisfied with the verdict that they had made, he said quite literally they had made sure that nobody had got away with murder. He thanked the jury for their work. He said that they applied themselves so diligently. He told them that they didn't have to sit on a jury again for about 20 years or so. And then in relation to the Murphys, he spoke about them because, Sean, what often happens, and it was the same with this case, is that the victim in a case, Ashling Murphy in this case, are often forgotten about. You know, juries don't hear about the person that they were before this happened, the 23-year-old primary school teacher, the lover of GAA, the talented musician, because all a jury is concerned about is how she died, and who was responsible. So Mr. Justice Hunt turned his attention to that, and he said that he really does hope that the family prepare some victim impact statements for the sentence hearing so that everyone can get a better flavour of the person that Ashling Murphy was, the person that the family truly misses every day. He said the case was particularly difficult for them because of the huge focus on it. As I speak to you now, there is, a large media presence outside the courtroom. It was extensively covered throughout the past few weeks. And he said that the reason that we're all here today and the reason that there's so much focus on it is because of the type of person that Ashling was. Again, she loved her sports. She loved GAA. He said that was very important in terms of good things in our community. She was a primary school teacher. She loved kids. And he said that he thinks that that's why people became so engaged with her story and with what happened to her. And in relation to Jozef Puska, he turned around and he said to the men and women of the jury, pointing at the dock, "We have evil in this room." That was followed by a round of applause as the jurors filed out of the courtroom. And I noticed Ashling's mother, Kathleen, with tears rolling down her cheeks, holding that beautiful framed photograph of Ashling aloft for the jurors to see as they filed out. She turned around and she showed everyone in the public gallery and on the press bench that photo of her beautiful daughter. Now, the judge did say at this point that he had asked for silence, but he said that that round of applause was understandable.
Yeah. When is there likely to be a sentencing hearing, Frank?
They've already set a date for the sentence hearing and they aren't going to waste any time. Clearly, there is only one decision to be made. There's only one punishment that the court can hand down, and that is the mandatory life sentence. But they have decided to set that sentence hearing for the 17th of this month, so this day next week. And that will obviously give the family an opportunity to prepare victim impact statements if they so wish. Jozef Puska will be brought back in for that sentence hearing, and then he will inevitably be handed that mandatory life sentence.
Frank, thanks a million for talking with us today. That was Frank Rainey there, our Newstalk's court correspondent. You can tune in to Kieran Cuddihy, obviously on the Hard Shoulder from 4 p.m. for more reaction to this verdict. And then later on today, Frank will be releasing another episode of his podcast, All Rise, the Ashling Murphy murder trial. That'll have a full roundup of everything that happened today, as well as revealing some of the elements they couldn't discuss while the trial was in progress.